Back in my old YouTube channel, I was originally going to do a Saints Row marathon and then wrapping up that said marathon by reviewing Agents of Mayhem. This was planned for years ever since I first started doing game reviews, but recently I noticed how unnecessary it was for me to even include AOM in a Saints Row marathon. While true, both games were developed by Volition and AOM is theoretically part of the Saints Row universe, alongside with including some characters from the said series, it was later confirmed that AOM isn't necessarily a Saints Row game, and is instead its own game. Should have been confirmed from the get-go because the announcement trailer definitely didn't tell us that much about the game, but still. Agents of Mayhem was released on August 15th, 2017 for around $40 to $60. I didn't get my copy of the game until 4 months later during a holiday sale at GameStop for only $10. Again, this game went from being sold from $40 to $60 to a $10 game. I mean, yeah, the game was on sale, sure, but still, going from a full-price game to a bargain bin price in only 4 months after release is sort of a bad sign. Not to mention the mixed reception the game got from both critics and players alike, and the layoffs Volition had after the game's release. I think the first review I saw was GameSpot giving the game a 4 out of 10, and that completely threw me off guard. Combined with the poor sales the game had, and AOM was kind of a rough game, I have to admit. When I first played it, I was stuck on a limb. I didn't hate it, but I didn't necessarily love it either. It was a crossroads for me. But I didn't beat the game until a week later, I believe. But despite all of that, I wanted to make a video about this game. Like I said, this was supposed to be part of a Saints Row marathon before realizing how weird it would be to wrap up that said marathon that didn't happen. But that didn't stop me from even trying to play this game again for the sake of this video. So compared to when I first played the game back 3 years ago, did my opinion on Agents of Mayhem change? Well, I think I might be spoiling the review already, but it's both between a tie of a yes and a no. Agents of Mayhem is centered around a hero organization called Mayhem who is going into war against Legion, an evil corporation being run by Dr. Babylon, who is planning on taking over the world. And now it's up to Mayhem to save the day and stop Legion's plans. I just want to get this out of the way right now, I really do love the game's presentation. There is some genuine effort put into the 2D animation, however, it doesn't exactly look that great. Yes, Volition was put in a tight budget with the game, but still, going from animating a scene to just using image stills definitely feels a bit lazy, not going to lie. At least when it's moving, it looks good. I get that it's supposed to parody 80s action cartoons, but for some reason, this looks more like Black Dynamite.
Hey, you look just like me, or do I look just like you? Or did your daddy my mom?
Apparently this was done by Powerhouse Animation, who also did some animation for other games like Metal Wolf Chaos, Ape Out, and even Netflix's Castlevania, so that's interesting. And while I'm at it, this game looks gorgeous. Running this on ultra settings on my graphics card, and this is like entering a fancy all-you-can-eat restaurant. I've always been a sucker to this art style, and AOM does not disappoint. The outline of the characters to the design of the city is without a doubt a beautiful thing to witness. From the bright blue sky to the neon lights of the city at night, AOM is without a doubt the perfect game to nail this art style down. And the sound design for the game is great too. The voice acting and the music is top notch, though there are a few audio glitches every now and then where there's nothing but a loud spike that kind of ruins it a little bit. And there is some frame rate drops every once in a while, but it's nothing too game breaking. This isn't MKX and Batman Arkham Knight when they first launched, that's for sure. The music was also composed by Malcolm Kirby Jr., who also composed the soundtrack to the 3rd and 4th Saints Row games. Though if you were expecting in-game radio stations and licensed music like the Saints Row games, then you're surely going to be disappointed. Not that it matters, since AOM sort of focuses more on traversal and platforming as opposed to the traditional driving from point A to point B like in the Saints Row series. Now, many people might call this a Crackdown clone, since Crackdown did this years before AOM did, 10 years in fact, but even if they were copying it, in a way they didn't make it work. In fact, I could argue that it's better than Crackdown. Sort of like how Saints Row 4 was compared to games like Prototype and Infamous, and yet managed on being as enjoyable as those games. And the way you traverse also looks cool too. However, that's only going by the presentation. While yes, AOM is a brilliant looking game and the audio design for the most part is passable, that's not enough to see if the game is worth playing or not. Now, I tried my best to be as fair as possible while playing this game, wondering what I loved and hated about the gameplay, and after playing the game again for the sake of this video, I still feel the same way as I was when I first played AOM back 3 years ago. You see, I try my best to give games a fair shot. Even if you've seen my past reviews back years ago with games like Spawn the Eternal and Chaos Legion, I tried to get the negative reactions the game got, and instead try to see the game from my own viewpoint. Granted, both of those games ended up becoming some of the worst games I played, so I guess you could call this a bad sign for AOM. However, I didn't necessarily hate AOM, even on my first playthrough. First, let's start with the positives. Agents of Mayhem gives you a handful of colorful characters to play as. The game has you start off with only 3 agents, Hollywood, Hardtrack, and Fortune. However, you can unlock more agents as you move on. Characters like Daisy, Redcard, Jolie, and even characters from the Saints Row series like Pierce, Oleg, and Johnny Gat and Kinsey as DLC. Each agent explains their own backstories about how they first joined Mayhem. However, some of them can be pretty silly. I mean, some of the agents like Rama joined Mayhem as a deal with Persephone, the leader of Mayhem, in order to help her out. Others like Fortune and Jolie joined because Persephone saw potential in their work and felt like they were worthy enough to join the organization. And then you get Hollywood, who only joined because he f***ed up while shooting for a TV show and accidentally killed a guy. It's pretty hilarious, not going to lie. And when you unlock those agents, you can be able to form a trio squad of whatever character you choose, and each can come with their own set of abilities that makes them feel different from the other agents. Some can be able to pierce through armor and shields, while others can either sneak around quietly or can be experts in hacking. Combine that with their very own skills as well during combat. The combat in AOM is addicting, quite possibly one of the most satisfying combat system in a game I've played. AOM sort of feels like I'm playing Doom or Quake, where I can't stop what I'm doing and just constantly move around to make sure that the enemies don't kill you. It's mindless, sure, but it's also rather fun and quite satisfying too. And you can also level up the agents you selected after defeating enemies or completing missions. AOM is a mostly linear game, but there are some side activities for you to do. There's not as much as the Saints Row games though. However, as much fun as it sounds on paper, in terms of execution, it seems to be lacking. Some of the main missions in Agents of Mayhem has you doing these side activities. The biggest example I can think of are the Legion layers, which the game really loves you doing a whole lot. Practically, you're just going down the Legion layer and either killing everyone inside, destroying their equipment, or hacking into their data. Now, if this was just stuck for the side activities, in fact, if there really wasn't that many of them, then it wouldn't be a big deal. But at times, AOM forces the players to do these layers in order to progress through the game, and they can be exhausting. They're not long, they do take around 4 to 5 minutes to complete, but due to how frequent you do them, it would feel like you did one for over 30 minutes, and it gets exhausting really quickly. Especially due to how similar the rooms are to one another. Hell, sometimes you don't even need to do anything. You enter a room and you can just simply move on without no one shooting you or you blowing anything up. With the Saints Row games, the activities they gave you at least had some excitement put into them. When you complete an activity, you were able to unlock something worthwhile, like a weapon, character upgrades, vehicles, and cribs. While true, some of the activities were a bit pain to complete, especially drug trafficking in Saints Row 1 and Mayhem in Saints Row 2, they at least gave you something that was worth the completion. Agents of Mayhem rewards you with cash and experience points, which yes is something, but you get them anyways just by playing the game regardless. And while we're on the topic, AOM is also sort of like a pseudo Borderlands RPG type game, if that's how you refer to it, I guess. You earn cash and experience points by either killing enemies or completing objectives. However, the agents can only level up if you have them available in your squad, in which case you can only have up to 3 people at once. Even if you're not using that member, they can still gain experience as long as they are part of that squad. And when you do, you can upgrade them with traditional skill points, and even they have their own merits. You can also give them some Legion crystals to give them new abilities as well. Volition did win a wall with these styles, I will admit, but regardless, they are effective. Now, if you're worried about not leveling up all the other agents, then you don't need to worry because AOM does introduce replayable missions and a difficulty selection. Depending on what level your agents are, the game can automatically set a difficulty for you. If your squad is set in a lower level, the game can give you some leeway and make the game a bit easier to complete. But the more your squad levels up, the harder the game gets. And AOM is a tough game, not going to lie. I guess after hearing the complaints about how easy the past Saints Row games were, Volition decided to make AOM feel a bit more challenging. And alongside with that, but you can also use the Legion crystals to actually use super levels on your agents as well, surpassing them from the level 20 rank. The game takes place in a non-fictional city of Seoul, South Korea. I already brought up about how much I love the design for the city. Every time I was driving around in Seoul or doing some platforming, I was loving the appreciation of detail the city has. The game even has a day to night cycle, something we haven't seen since Saints Row 2 in 2008. So overall, I was appreciating the design of the city and what kind of beautiful details it had. However, in terms of how alive the city is, it's really bland. While yes, you can do things in the city like doing side activities as mentioned, alongside with crates you can find, and they can give you some interesting items ranging from cash, blueprints for vehicles, materials, and every once in a while, a new skin for a weapon or your agent. That's it really, because Seoul feels rather lifeless and nothing interesting is going on. This is something I noticed in games like Mafia 2 and The Getaway. While you have the city to drive around in, they only exist as a way to pad the game's length, with little to no content going for it. It might not be the best example for AOM since it does have a bit more content compared to games like The Getaway and Mafia 2, but even then it's very limited for what it has to offer. At least the stuff you get is cool. While there is no full-blown character customization in AOM, you do get some pretty nifty skins for the agents. Some of them you can unlock by finding crates around the game, or by completing missions and leveling up your character. It's a nice reward they give you, and the amount of stuff you can unlock is still there. That's always been a prime staple since the first Saints Row, and I'm glad that Volition can still reward you with stuff just by exploring. But again, the problem is the lack of content it has. Again, those Legion layers, man, they're like herpes. You do them so many times, it really burned me out. In fact, I was completely burned out as a whole after beating this game's story. Agents of Mayhem is also a weird game. I get that at this rate it's like a prime staple for Volition. I mean, Saints Row III introduced a giant-sized dildo bad, and Saints Row 4 went balls to the walls crazy with aliens, superpowers, and a kaiju soda can. And AOM also fits in that category of weird, obscure humor. We have some jokes that I will admit did get a chuckle out of me, but other ones that honestly tried way too hard. And around the end of the game, one of the bad guys named Steel Toe falls in love with a K-pop star named Aisha. Now I know everyone is doing their conspiracies and wondering whether or not this Aisha is connected to the same Aisha from the first two Saints Row games. However, it turns out that the name Aisha are just initials for the first letters of each member of the group. Ariam, Insu, Sungjing, Hiromi, and Aisha. One more name and these girls would have been a Soul Calibur or King of Fighters character. There's also word going around about how Agents of Mayhem takes place after one of the non-canonical endings to Saints Row Get Out of Hell. More specifically, the one where the whole entire series ends up getting rebooted, as Gat is now a cop. This shows in AOM 2 when Gat appears in the game, as DLC, after being made available for pre-order. Kenzie also appears as DLC for the game as well, alongside with a third character named Lazarus. However, I only got Gat and Kenzie, and honestly, I really don't have that much of an interest to even get Lazarus. And that really sums up my whole experience with AOM as a whole. I will admit, AOM is a fun game. The combat is great, the game looks beautiful, and it has a big scale in terms of length. Whether it's the main campaign or it's just the side stuff, the completionist rate is there. However, I was getting rather burned out at the end of it all. So burned out that I didn't even want to 100% fully complete the game, which I never felt that way with any of the Saints Row games at all. I think what hurt AOM was how much more the game could have had. If Volition added in a bit more content and managed on polishing the game up a little bit more, alongside with some more marketing, then Agents of Mayhem could have been better. There was so much care in this game that after hearing about how poorly the game sold and the reception it got, it hurts me because of how much effort was put in here. Hell, the Agents of Mayhem Twitter account got shut down, and it sucks because this game isn't getting so much support than it should have gotten. In fact, the concept as a whole seems to be more interesting as a TV show rather than a video game. If it's possible, maybe get an Agents of Mayhem show greenlit on Netflix. I mean, the animators also did work on the Castlevania show on Netflix, and that show is amazing. So I would like to see AOM come back as something else. You know, besides a board game. As for Volition, well, even though there were some major layoffs from the game, it was already confirmed that a new Saints Row game is already in development, and we might get more information about the game this year. So I'm pretty excited to see where Volition will go from here, because after the failure that AOM had, I think this is a wake-up call Volition needed. But should I recommend Agents of Mayhem? Honestly, even with some of the problems I have addressed and how burned out I was from it, I can't lie and say that I did sort of had a good time playing it. It's not an underrated classic by any means, but I view this as more of a hidden gem. So if you can find it at your local game store for a pretty cheap price, then go for it. But if you're a super duper god overlord PC gamer, then I say wait until the game goes on sale. For some reason, Agents of Mayhem still costs $30 on Steam, and I do think it's not worth that price for what it's worth. Especially since I got the game $10 a couple of months after it launched, I say wait until it goes on sale on Steam, where it goes for around $5 as well. It doesn't really matter anyway what platform you get it on, you are getting a pretty solid third-person shooter with some open-world elements. It can be a bit bare bones at times, but when you look past that, it can be rather fun from time to time. Just, again, be careful around those Legion layers. They can get to you. I still have battle scars from them even from 3 years ago. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you like what you see, then make sure you hit the little like button down below, and let me know in the comment section on what you thought of Agents of Mayhem. If you also like what you see as well, then you can also be able to hit subscribe, and also ring the little bell icon to get notified when a brand new video hits. Alongside with that, but I'm also on Twitter and Twitch. For Twitch, I'm going to be able to try to live stream more often, so if you're interested on that, follow me on Twitch as well, and follow me on Twitter if you just like me constantly shitposting 24/7 rather than me making actual content. With that said, thank you all so much for watching, and lastly, have a nice day.
Agents of Mayhem.